My wife always sits in the front. So good morning, Stevie.
Good morning, Paul.
How are you, man?
I'm great. Why don't we go ahead and get started?
Let's
and welcome to the 61st ever Sunday Assembly in San Diego. Woo! We are so glad you are here today. Thank you for being here. A little May gray to get us ready for the June gloom coming up. So we're videotaping this event. If you don't want to participate in that, please know this is the media-free zone, so we won't be included in that process. And we're going to start out, as we usually do, with the amazing Mr. Paul Svensson.
So good morning, everybody. So let's do this old song. This is a great song. I met John Fogerty one time, and all I said to him was, "Thank you." And he goes, "For what?" This is like late 80s. I said, "Thank you for making all your great hit songs that guys like me could play in my little garage band in the 60s. You know, so awesome." Let's all stand up and sing this thing. Well, I did a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day, but I never lost one minute of sleep, worried about the way things might have been. You know the big wheels keep on turning, proud Mary keep on burning. We're rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Cleaned a lot of plates in Memphis, pumped a lot of pain down in New Orleans, but I never saw the good side of the city till I reached the ride on the river. Where the big wheels keep on turning, you know the proud Mary keeps on burning. Oh, rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Sing it again now. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Every 60 band play this. Well, if you come down to the river, man, you're gonna find some people who live. You don't have to worry if you got no money. People on the river are happy. You know that they keep on turning. Well, a proud Mary keep on burning. Oh, rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. You know we're rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Roll some more. Come on, rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Down the river now. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. Well, welcome to Sunday Assembly. Sunday Assembly is a secular, non-religious community that meets monthly to hear great talks, to connect for community events, to sing some songs, to have some snacks, but mostly we're here to celebrate this one life that we know that we have. The motto for Sunday Assembly is live better, help often, and wonder more, and every Sunday Assembly has a theme. The theme for this Sunday Assembly is making waves. My name is Stephen Soden. I'll be your MC today. We do a little thing. How many of it's your first time, by show of hands, Sunday Assembly? Give those people a high five or a wave. We're so glad to have you here. Thank you so much. We usually have about 500 or 600 people. This is a smaller group because of the rain. Thank you so much for being here. We're sort of focusing on quality now. That's what we're doing. We do a little thing called Life Happens, and that's just people sharing things out of their last, since we met last time, things that are happening in their life. So I'll read these here. I've just entered into a joint venture to help veterans learn how to farm hemp with the California Cal Poly Pomona. That's Andrew. Andrew, that's awesome. Wow. I turned 80 on April 15th and very healthy, happy, and sometimes wise. That's Suzanne. Suzanne, Happy birthday to you. I said many times here, I'm going to live to be 100 and die on my birthday, but I want what you have, which is be young and 80. That's fantastic. From the Polendo family, they officially closed on their new house this last Tuesday. Today is their last Sunday Assembly, San Diego, and we will miss you all dearly. The Polendo family is here, and we will miss you too. It's been a wonderful, wonderful time having you here, and we will say, see you later. I got through that one. I don't know. That hurts. We have Help Happens, and Alexis will come up and let us know what's going on in the community.
Hi. So the Community Service Committee had our first ever in-person meeting. Not first ever, but first this new year, and we have a few new members, but you are still welcome to join. This is not like you missed the first one, you're out of luck, because we had a lot of people sick. So we're gonna, if you are interested in community service, just give me your email or hit me up after assembly. What we decided is we are going to remain with all ongoing projects. So we're still going to be feeding the homeless. We're going to be doing Stand Up for Kids, where we feed homeless youth, which is a separate feeding the homeless adults, and then this is kids. We're also going to be doing food box packing with Sarah, and but we are going to start 2 new projects, and this is where I need your help, and I need your input, and I need your bodies. Let's not make it weird. So we used to do harvest crops, which is where we picked fruit off private trees, and we supplied them to food banks. The reason this was super, super great was that as I've worked in the distribution of a food bank, and I saw when there was fresh fruit what that did to little kids' faces. It changed them. They would walk through past rows and rows and rows and rows of cans and see that one shiny apple or that one orange. And when I was working there, they used to put that fruit away and wait for kids or wait for people that could really use it. And then like an elderly couple would walk in and they'd be like, here's some oranges under the table. It was a clandestine meetings. But so that is really important. The problem is we've been having trouble scheduling those. So we're actually going to try to switch from harvest crops to Produce Good. Produce Good does the same work, supplies food banks. They also pick up after like a community, what is word? Farmers market. Thanks, Jen. There's my brain over there. So Jen has been, doing some research into them. And after farmers markets, anything left over, Produce Good can also, and that would be us volunteering, receive all that food for the food banks as well. Then there's the other project we're excited about. We've been, for the last 2 years, trying to work out doing a build in Mexico, to build a house for little kids living on dirt floors, and the cost has been prohibitive. It's about $8,000 for supplies, plus your room and food and stuff like that. So, if you are interested in that, you need to come see me. It's not going to happen unless we get a lot more interest and do some fundraising. The alternative to that we're looking into is just doing a build with Habitat for Humanity, which would be just a one-day, all-day commitment, and we would just start building, and you don't have to have any building skills for this at all. You just show up willing to work just to get some housing for people. If you have an opinion on Harvest Crops versus Produce Good, if you have an opinion on building a house in San Diego with Habitat versus in Mexico, please come see me. We want your input, we want your hammering hands, and we definitely want you on the Community Service Committee if you're interested. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have this, Laura's kind of this sheet that tells me exactly what I'm supposed to do, but I'm still really terrible at this. So I missed to tell you that we do have free childcare. We can watch kids 1.5 and up. You saw the slide go by. I didn't say anything about it. But We have professional childcare people in there, and they do a fantastic job. And I believe we have Reptile here today. Dan and R brought Reptile for the kids. So let's see, where are we? Now I'm going back to the thing. We have a reading today, a personal ad from Earth by Kathleen Culver, read by Jeremy Grace. Jeremy?
Personal Ad from the Earth by Kathleen Culver. A 4.5 billion-year-old planet seeks highly conscious species for lifelong romantic partnership. Hoping to share interest in overseeing complex organization of life forms, chemical and physical interactions, a family enterprise including everything from rocks to microbes, crops to cybernetics. After work, we'd play. Moonlit nights swimming with phosphorescent dolphins, sun-filled mornings on wind-swept prairies. I'm a planet made for adventure, sensuousness, poetry, ready to give my all to a species who can join me and return my love. My last partnership ended in heartbreak, but I still hope to find the right species someday. If you enjoy turquoise waters and fresh air, give me a call.
Thank you very much. Our speaker today, Julie Thomas, is long-standing but recently retired, congratulations, principal investigator for the Coastal Data Information Program, CDIP, at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. She will share with us essential information about how shorelines, including how baseline and real-time measurements along the shoreline are made, measurements that indicate the threatened areas along the high tides and energetic waves. She'll also address the commercial transportations at the Port of Long Beach, explaining the ongoing efforts for safe environmental and economic improvements in the navigational waters offshore Southern California. Please welcome Julie Thomas.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and Laura for giving me a call and inviting me here today. It's really a pleasure. I picked these two particular projects because one is very local, and it's something anybody that lives by the shoreline, visits the shoreline. We have restaurants on the shoreline, might be interested. And then I also threw in this one up at Long Beach because it is affecting our economy. So I have 15 minutes to zip through these, so I will talk, and I understand that there's questions after the meeting, right? So we'll hold questions till then. I'm going to talk about these two programs. Let's see, the coastal data, this is called CDIP and SCOOS. And CDIP has been at Scripps since 1975, funded by the Army Corps of Engineers. You don't realize it, but every time you listen to KPBS and the surf report, like the La Jolla waves are 2 foot this morning, and Scott Bass comes online and gives you this surf readout. That actually comes out of a lab at Scripps that we run. And we send that data. It's a long road. It goes back to Stennis, Mississippi, then on to this network to all of the National Weather Service offices. But it's part of a whole larger network that is primarily funded by the Army Corps of Engineers. We also have state funding, industry, et cetera. The other program, SCOOS, is the Southern California Coastal Ocean Observatory System. That's funded by NOAA. And that NOAA runs, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association runs the National Weather Services that we're all familiar with. And I had the great pleasure of working with both of those programs. I was director and the principal investigator of these. So it was a really nice partnership that came together. I put this picture in of the Sea Lodge in La Jolla, 1988 or 83 storm, when the windows actually broke, for those of you that were around. CDIP had a buoy off of San Clemente Island at Big Rock, and we were measuring 50-foot waves out there. That storm was very local. It wasn't forecast because it didn't start in Japan or the South Pacific. The winds just kicked up very quickly, and within a day or two, a few days, we had very large storms, so it caught everybody off guard. Okay. I just wanted to put up the map. I said that these data are sent out to the National Weather Service. There's about 71 buoys out there right now. We work in partnership with NOAA because through CDIP, we often call what we have the inner ring. These are more or less coastal buoys within about 50 miles of the shoreline. And NOAA tends to put like Tanner Banks offshore. For those of you that go out on the water at all on the ocean, there's a lot of wave monitoring. These buoys measure waves, sea surface temperature. The NOAA buoys have winds and met data. We really focus on high quality wave data. And so there's about 71 of these around the coastal U.S., down into Guam, Marshall Islands, Saipan, around the Pacific also. And, you know, flooding in San Diego County is not a new thing. We've had several instances at 83 at the Sea Lodge, but we've had some large storms that have come through here in 98. This is the picture of Huntington, but actually I think in 98 was when we lost the Ocean Beach Pier, and that has been rebuilt. And then this is again the Marine Room. So we get a lot of flooding in our area. The islands offshore make this a very, and the way that our shoreline curves in, make this a very complex area. We call it the Southern California Bight, B-I-G-H-T. And a lot of the modeling, the waves modeling, wind modeling that goes on through the National Weather Service, they can be very perplexed about Southern California. Overall, we have benign weather, right? We're very lucky. We have nice weather here. But every once in a while, it does kick up, and to actually forecast inside the islands, because there's a lot of what we call island shadowing, and I actually have a picture of that later on. Okay, so CDIP operates and maintains these buoys. They update every half hour. Everything I'm showing you today is online. You can get a CDIP app on your iPhone or Android or whatever you have, and everything is free of charge. This is what your taxpayers' money does. So the red line here at Point Loma, there's a buoy about 10 miles west of here, off of Point Loma, right on the border with Mexico. It's our southernmost buoy. And this would be what we call the wave model. When you go to the National Weather Service and you look and you say, oh, the waves are going to be 4 foot in 5 days, that red line is what they're looking at. That is a model that's developed in Washington, D.C., and it's a federally NOAA-funded model. It's not always correct, and that's one thing I'm going to show you at Long Beach. It's very easy to underpredict or overpredict in the Southern California Bight. But we actually have the blue line, which are measurements. So I know this is hard to see, but I just wanted to show you Point Loma, Mission Bay, Scripps Pier, it's a nearshore one, Torrey Pines, Oceanside, Camp Pendleton. We are very fortunate. Scripps graduate students love these buoys. We get a lot of funding for local buoys. So we actually are very fortunate here because there are parts of the U.S. that are very far in between any type of wave information. So we have quite a bit here. We have all sorts of products on the historical database. Everything that since 1975 is accessible. The technology has changed, but we have, everything is archived online through our website. You can access anything. The coastal engineers like these max waves. It tells you that there was 21 foot. Oh, this is actually in meters, so that's 21 meters. This was the 1988 storm off of Mission Bay. So here's it on feet here, meters here. So it was, 27 foot. But this is HS, so you have to realize that's a significant height. What you need to do is double that for a peak wave over a half hour. When you hear 4 foot on the radio at La Jolla, they're giving you what's called a significant height. The surfers will know that really there's going to be an 8-foot wave coming in the half-hour span of the wave measurement. That HS is an average of the 1/3 highest waves. So, you know, people sometimes call or send us and say, you know, your buoy's incorrect. It's not measuring as, you know, there was this wave that overtopped my boat or something. And they forgot to double it. They didn't realize that they were getting a significant height. So that's really important if you're a mariner. Okay, this is actually what I wanted to show you, though, today, because this is a model that is updating hourly. So let me explain. The dark blue here is the tide. So we all know tides cycle through every 6 hours, high tide, low tide. Have any of you heard of the king tides? They're the extreme tides in San Diego that we get, actually in California. During a king tide, it's an exceptionally high tide. And what can happen is that normally it's fine, but, and we love those low tides. It's a good time to go to the beach and see some reefs and life in our ecosystems. But what can happen during the king tides is we can get these energetic waves. And that's when the damage is done. Those 1983, 1988, those were all occurrences of storms that happened during the high tides. So what this plot does is that light blue is the actual waves. So it puts the waves on top of the tides. And I'm going to show you why that's important. We have this for several locations all the way up the coast, actually. The reason why that's important is that as your waves get bigger, the tides get bigger. This is up in Cardiff, and that brownish line, I think it's brown, is when we've done extensive surveying there, and we know that when the waves and the tide, when that hits the brown line, there will be overtopping into the parking lots. Are any of you familiar with North County, Cardiff area? Walk along the beach there. It's a nice area to walk. And that whole parking lot at South Cardiff, Seaside parking lot, overtops. Also, when it hits the red line, I live in Cardiff. That's my commute on the coast to La Jolla to Scripps. And I have come down the road there and had small pebbles hit my windshield during extreme tides. So when that red line is hit, there's a lot of wash that can come up. Now they're doing all sorts of, type of renovation right now in Cardiff to try to avoid that in the future. But it can be a very vulnerable area. And here's some examples. Here's the Highway 101 right here. Here's sandbagging at anybody been to the Chart House, Pacific Grill? These are all what's called Restaurant Row in Cardiff, right here. Once again, that's the parking lot. This is here. And why is this important? This is important because the planners for the city of Encinitas need to know when do we put the cones out to divert the cars right there. When do the restaurants actually go and put those sandbags out? Has anybody lifted a sandbag? Those things are heavy that they put out. And you don't want to have to put them out if it's not going to really overtop. So we actually send out notifications when we see that the tides and the waves are going to hit those thresholds. Then we send notifications to the city of Encinitas, needs to put out the cones. The lifeguards, property along the shoreline, they need to warn people. There's San Alejo State Park right there. I don't know if you've seen, there's a lot of erosion goes on. They don't want their campers on the beach or near those cliffs at that time. We actually send it to the National Weather Service. They put out the official warning that goes out to the public that says expected flooding. So we send these notifications every hour to our local community and try to give them a heads up. Look, at our records are showing that this is going to be overtopping in the parking lot or overtopping onto Highway 101. And so you can go online, you can see these records yourself. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to switch gears now up to Long Beach because I think there's a really interesting project going on there. This is the 9th largest port in the world. It's combined with LA, it's the largest port in the US. 50% of our oil comes in through Long Beach. And what most people don't realize is that offshore, in order to bring in now these 1,100-foot crude oil tankers, so 1,100 feet, 2.5 football lengths, or if you've been to Scripps Pier, that's 1,000 feet. When I stand at one end and look at the end, and then I think, oh my gosh, these tankers are still another 100 foot longer. These are big tankers coming in here. They carry a lot of oil. 50% of our oil in California comes in through Long Beach. And they can't get in. They're too deep. They're too heavy. They're too deep when they're fully loaded. So there are 5 oil companies that are doing what are called lightering offshore. Chevron is about 30 miles off of Dana Point. Marathon that I'm going to focus on today, used to be Tesoro, then it was bought out by Endeavor. Now they're called Marathon. They bring in the largest amount of oil. They're an intermediary provider is what they're called. And they're about 100 miles offshore. But there are 5 oil companies that are lightering every week off our coastline. And what that means is the 1,100-foot tanker is here, and they will offload it to 5 smaller tankers. This takes about 35 hours per tanker, 8 hoses. It takes about a week to do all 5 of them. They do it about once a month when they get these VLCCs, very large crude containers. They're called VLCCs. And it's a process. It's expensive. It's an environmental hazard. It's not very efficient. Economically, it's like millions to do this. So, about 5 years ago, we were contacted through our program CDIP. And I've worked with the Jacobson pilots in Long Beach for a long time. They're a wonderful group of people up here. And we started looking, so predominantly, like I said, we archive all of our data. And the wave, this is just a compass rose. And you can see that most of the waves come in from the west into Long Beach. Long Beach is right here. So most of the waves are coming here, and it's not a factor because there's not a whole bunch of waves coming right in there to stop it. But what's the concern is this little south spit right here, and these are waves that are coming in. So I wanted to put this in here because there are many organizations that are involved in this project. This is a big project. State of California, the ports, and mineral, these are the federal agencies on the bottom, called the Dynamic Underkill Clearance. And this is the channel they come in. The pilots transfer off here. They bring these crude oil tankers in. This is the dicey area right here where that channel gets shallower because, remember, it's very expensive to dredge for the Army Corps. And so right now that channel is dredged to 76. So the idea is they're mandated to have a 10% clearance. Can they actually bring in a heavier weighted tanker that doesn't have that 10% clearance under draft? And so we are putting all of our scientific data together. And this is just a statistic. On an 1,100-foot tanker, when the waves are on the stern coming from on the south, coming into the port of Long Beach, a tanker's coming in. For every degree that a tanker pitches, they lose 9.6 feet of draft. So that's a lot. When you have 65-foot, these tankers are, 59 foot, 60, actually they're 69 feet right now is what they want to bring in. So that soft swell is a lot. I mentioned previously that this is that global model, the wave model. I think it was in red before. And I said sometimes it doesn't always predict accurately. This is the buoy right here, what the buoy's actually measuring, and this is the prediction. So it's like at least a foot different significant height. So that's 2 feet different. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have an 1,100-foot tanker that's pitching, it's a lot. We actually send these messaging to the pilots up at Long Beach. We have now been paid to install 3 buoys, one here right at the entrance to Long Beach, west swell, south swell, and we update all of this information to a company, believe it or not, in Rotterdam, who is bringing in the same type of company of crude oil tankers, and they take in all of the information, the metadata, the water level, which is the tides, our wave buoys, the models, the wave models, the winds, the salinity, and these crude tankers have motion sensors on them, so they're actually measuring the pitch of the wave. And every hour that is being calculated, sent to the pilots at Long Beach. They have now brought in over 50 since, let's see, the project's been going 4 years. They started going operational 2 years ago after we tested the bejesus out of this whole thing. And so now they've brought in about 50 tankers between 65 and 69 feet. Every foot that they add is $1 million of crude oil. So it is really saving our economy. It's saving our environmentally. We don't have 8 hoses going offshore. We have 1 offloading to the dock. There's a lot of really good efforts that is coming out of that partnership. So I wanted to let you know that your federal dollars, your state dollars, this is a positive thing. They're trying to apply this to other ports around the U.S., and it's just been really successful. Okay, so like I said, these are the websites. All of these data are online, and I know my time is up, so thank you very much.
Julie, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. I grew up in San Diego, and that's the most I knew about that. It's fantastic stuff and very useful, and I use those charts all the time. Paul, what do you think? One more, just so we know, we do have a youth group, so if you're a young person and you want to participate in that, Candelaria will be meeting you in the back. So go ahead and take that, and we'll go over again to Mr. Paul Svensson for Dock of the Bay.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, and then I'll watch them roll away again, and I'll just sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away, sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Oh, I left my home in Georgia and headed for the Frisco Bay, 'cause I've got nothing to live for. Looks like nothing's gonna come my way, but now I'm just a sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away, sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Looks like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people ask me to, so I guess I'll remain the same. You know I'm sick, used in my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. 2,000 1,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Now I'm just a sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Can you whistle? Good singing.
Thank you once again, Paul. Well, this time for a personal moment. So personal moment could be anything out of your life. We really appreciate when you share the stories. We've had some really fantastic ones. We had Leah, who's not with us anymore. She's up in Oregon, but she told us a story about getting run over by a car and then remembering that it was her civic duty to go vote. It was a fantastic story. Or Neil Hamovich, who ate a half of a donut and told his parents that that's the way they sold it to him at the donut shop because it was Lent and he wasn't supposed to. And we've had some really heartbreaking ones. People have shared some real stories out of their lives that are difficult. If you have a story like that and you don't feel like you can get through it on your own, you can write it down. We'll have somebody read it for you. So lots of opportunities there. Today we're going to have a personal moment from Nancy Alvarado. Nancy?
Good morning. I would never presume to imagine any of your ages, but does anybody here remember the 70s? Okay, so there were two things that were prevalent in the 70s that are much diminished now. One of those was roller skating, and the other was free-range children. So I was a free-range child. I'm a child from a big family, and so I think my mom got kind of sick of most of us most of the time. And so we were shooed out the door pretty much as early as possible, and we were allowed to come back in when the streetlight went on. And it was the 70s, so we roller skated. Now, there were all the cute little girls with their cute little white skates with the pom-poms on top who could dance, you know, in the skating rink. And then there were the free-range children who had metal wheels and just skated for hours because we didn't really have a lot of other things to do, right? So I was a free-range child, and I was outside much more than any of my friends were. And so during the time of day when normal children were playing outside, I'd play outside like a normal child. But before they came out and after they went back in, I would roller skate. And so I would think, I could probably roller skate 10 times around the block. I bet I could roller skate 20 times around the block. I bet I could roller skate all the way to the next city. And that's the kind of things I did during my free-range child hours. In fact, my best friend and I had made a plan to roller skate across the United States the minute we turned 18. We had it all mapped out. We were going to roller skate down Route 66, one side to the other, wild and free, because it was the 70s, and we were free-range children. At the age of 11, my siblings and I were picked up and taken from our parents and put into a children's shelter. And the children's shelter was not horrible. It's a system like school, and I'm really good at systems like school. You're in blue chips if you make your bed, and you're in yellow chips if you fold your clothes, and you're in red chips if you pick up your dishes from the table when you're done eating, and I'm really good at earning chips. I love chips. And so that was great. I earned my chips. I was a good girl. It was not a horrible experience. I mean, there were a few drawbacks, though, one of which was there were no books at all in the school. And the other was, after years of being a free-range child, I wasn't used to being inside. I wasn't used to not being able to wander. And so the closest I could get, like, I was a good girl and it was a good system and I managed to make it work and it was fine. But in the afternoon, when we were allowed outside to play, I would go to the swing set. And I realized if I swung high enough on the swing set, I could look out over the fence that surrounded the children's shelter and I could see the neighborhood. And I could see the ice cream man. And I could see front lawns and people barbecuing and neighborhood people doing neighborhoody things. And so that was my deal every afternoon. I'd earn all my chips and I'd do all my chores and I'd do my homework and I'd go outside and I'd swing. And I'd look at the neighborhood and I'd see people doing neighborhood things like roller skating, things that free-range children get to do. And so one day in the children's shelter, these people came and they brought boxes and boxes of roller skates. And they let us borrow them for the afternoon. And so I strapped on my skates and I started skating, and I skated through all the paths that there were in the children's shelter again and again and again and again, and all the other little kids fell down and scraped their knees and got blisters and got tired and went back in, and I skated for literally hours, and it was the closest that I had been to feeling like myself since I had been in the shelter. I felt like I was flying. Time stopped. My circumstances were gone. Nothing existed except me and the wheels and the wind and the freedom of feeling like myself, a free-range child, roller skating. And I have no idea who those people were. I have no idea what their motivation was. Don't know why they came. Don't know why it occurred to them to bring roller skates. Don't know any of their names. I'm certain they didn't know mine. That was 41 years ago. I'm 52 years old. I was 11. And I still remember that feeling that somebody took the time, that somebody was kind enough to say, hey, just for today, we're going to lift these little kiddos out of their circumstances. We're going to give them something different. We're going to help them feel like themselves again. And so I guess no seed ever sees the flower. I'm sure they have absolutely no idea, those people, if they even exist, who they are. You know, that 41 years later, I just remember that somebody took the time to lift me outside of my circumstances. But it's a thing that I carry with me all the time. I teach elementary school, and I teach kids that have really hard lives. I do a lot of work in Mexico, building houses, cough, cough, see me later, see Alexis later, cough, cough. And I'm always really conscious that I cannot change kids' lives. I can't change their circumstances, but I do have the power to be like those roller skate people, and just for a day, just for a moment, bring something that is joy and lift them out of their circumstances. And I know that that's part of help happening. Thank you.
Thank you. That was terrific. You know, there was a person that I met a long time ago. He was part of a group that goes to Haiti, and doctors go down and they fix cleft palates, and they do prosthetics for people, and they do this all for free. He takes like $500 with him, and he buys shoes, because a lot of the reasons that people have prosthetics is because their feet get infected because they step on things. And I said, God, you guys do so much. I just feel like we don't do enough. And he said, never underestimate what you do. You never know who's watching or how it'll affect somebody, and there's an example of that. So it's good. And I like to think of you driving, riding across the United States in steel roller skates, because I know a rock this big will make you have a bad day. So good luck with that. Hope you live that dream one day. All right, our theme today is making waves. So today I'd like to talk about making waves. I'd like to talk about caution, and I'd like to talk about playing in the waves. So about 15 years ago in the summertime, my nephew Anders, he was 11 years old at the time, he came to visit us from the Bay Area down in the summertime, and my son and I took him to the beach. That's what we like to do in the summertime. My son was 8, and Anders had been to the beach. I know that because my family had camped with theirs in the Bay Area, and the beach there in the Bay Area is different, as you know, than the Southern California beaches. Because up in the Bay Area, it could be a rocky shore or dunes and very fine sand, and you look at the water. Here in San Diego, we play in the sand and we play in the water, and it was an entirely different experience for him, so we wanted to give him a really good experience. So we grabbed our boogie boards, made sure the kids were sunscreened. We went down to our favorite spot in Ocean Beach, just south of the dog beach, right there by the jetty, lifeguard tower number 5, right in this spot. And I did my usual requisite speech for the children. My son had heard it many times, so I was really focusing on Anders to make sure he'd have a good time. Not to get too close to the jetty because it's rocky. That there was not a rip current, but there was a current, and it was pushing southward, and I wanted to make sure that he had focused on where our towels were, where the lifeguard tower was, so that if he got pushed down the beach, he wouldn't be lost. And I told him about stingrays. So most of you in Southern California, you probably know about stingrays, but in case you don't, stingray is a type of a sea ray. It's a cartilaginous fish that's related to sharks. There are 8 types of stingrays. The stingrays that are down here are round stingrays. They're called Howler's round stingrays. They're about this big when they're full grown. And they're highly adaptive. They sit on the ocean floor, and you can't see them. They blend in with the sand. And they have a tail that's about 2.5 times the length of their body, and it's like a whip. And at the end of this whip, there's a venomous barbed spike. Now, stingrays don't attack people offensively. They only attack when they feel they're threatened, and they feel like they're threatened when you step on them. So, and when they do that, they whip that tail up, and that venomous poised spark ends up in your ankle or your foot or the bottom of your foot or your leg, and it's super painful, I'm told. I've seen it, never been stung by a stingray, and I spent thousands of hours in the water. I grew up at the beach. And my family hasn't been stung either, and part of that's luck, but another part of it is that because of my family, from the time I first went in the water, I was taught how to do the Stingray Shuffle, which is not a dance. Stingray Shuffle means you just don't pick your feet up. You just walk out without lifting your feet. And if you encounter a stingray, they'll just swim off. And that's it. So I explained this to Anders very carefully because I wanted him to have a good time. So, of course, we went into water, and 5 steps in, he steps on a stingray, and he's stung, and he's screaming, and I know exactly what happened. I'm about 20 feet away from him, and I run over, and I grab him, take him up to the lifeguard tower, and they put his foot in a bucket of really hot water. Because the venom in a stingray sting is heat labile, and it means that it deteriorates in the heat. So you take it as much as you can stand, and you stick your feet in there. And eventually, he was inconsolable at first, but he was starting to talk, and we were sitting there for about an hour and a half. And as we did, remarkably, people unsolicited came up and they started sharing their experiences, their stingray stories, which I think would be a great documentary. So I'm just going to get an 11-year-old, stick his foot in a bucket near the lifeguard tower and film it. But it's stingray stories. So they were sharing their experiences. And I think they wanted to do that because he was now an initiate into a group that they were a part of, and they wanted to let him know that he belonged. But we share our stories. We are our stories. Our experiences are what tailor what we do. It's what makes us the people that we are. It makes us more cautious or less cautious, and it informs us what people taught us and what we learned as we went along the way. For instance, my 11-year-old nephew, prior to this, had learned through his experience to be the type of kid that would listen intently to an adult and pretend like he understood what you were saying, and then go do whatever he wanted to do. And then after he was stung, I'm sure he was a lot more cautious, and he probably was very cautious about going into the water, and possibly the reason he joined the Air Force. He just wanted to enjoy avoid the water altogether. But I mean, caution is important. It's important to learn these things and to be cautious. I mean, it's a way that we soft animals are able to live on this planet and not be crushed or eaten, or we learn. We're cautious, and caution is a good thing. And using our experiences to tailor what we do in the future is super helpful, and passing that along. And sometimes you throw caution to the wind, though. I mean, there are very clear examples. For instance, in the instance where my nephew got stung, I didn't heed my own advice. I ran over to him through the surf to take him up to the lifeguard tower. I mean, there's very clear examples of throwing caution aside. And 100 times out of 100, if a child is in trouble, the parent is going to go and save the child, whatever the circumstances. And there are very clear examples of this. Some people make their career out of being the ones to run into a dangerous situation, firefighters or first responders. Think of the people who ran into the Twin Towers to save people, to help. And many of them lost their lives or suffered serious health consequences or PTSD from that. I think of Anthony Burgess, a Venezuelan Parkland High School student who, though he was shot 5 times, put himself in a doorway, was credited with saving 20 other children. He just went back to Parkland. He survived, and he just went back there for the first time just recently. I mean, those are very clear examples of when you put caution aside. You throw caution aside. But it's not always so clear. It's not always so clear when we throw caution aside. For instance, if you're on a bus and you're sitting next to see somebody who's being abused by someone else at another seat, I mean, it's hard enough to sit there and watch that happen, but how hard is it to go sit in the seat in front of them and turn around and talk to them and dissipate that situation and give them something else to focus on? I mean, it takes an element of courage. And anybody might do that on any day, and anybody might not do it on another day. You can't fault yourself. It's what you bring to it on that day. Or an instance where, forgive me, because I forgot where I was, and I'm going to tell you that honestly. It's, if you have your heart broken, if you're in a relationship and you have your heart broken, or trust is broken, How do you know when to put your heart back out there? How do you know when to trust again? It's a very difficult thing, and it's not clear-cut. On this day, May 19th, 1943, this very day, 76 years ago, in Berlin, Germany, they declared Berlin to be Judean free of the Jews, this day. By this time, 3 million Jewish men, women, and children had already been slaughtered. Eventually, it was up to over 5 million Jewish people. 3% of the world's population died in World War II. 3% of the world's population. In 1943, if you spoke up, if you made waves, in 1943, that was a death sentence. I mean, you couldn't stand up alone against that at that time. But was there a point along the way where you could have? Was there a point that you could have stood up and made waves and said something? And what was that point, and how would you know? Imagine if you lived in a society where xenophobia was rampant. If you lived in a society where the leaders in your country were vilifying another group of people. Imagine if you lived in that society. How would you know when you should stand up? How would you know what you should do? What would you do? I mean, if you lived in a society like that, what would be the point you would have to take action? I mean, would you have a go bag so that you could go to a protest and be vocal? And would you get with other people? Would you speak up alone? I don't know the answer to this. I don't know when is the time. I can only speak for myself. I do know that if I were in a situation like that, I would take that seriously. I wouldn't shrug it off. It would be very serious. Sometimes it's a time to shuffle your feet. And sometimes it's a time to make waves. Thank you. We will take 1 minute for silent reflection. Thank you. If you're making an announcement, if you wouldn't mind to come up right now, and while people are coming up, I want to let you know that Sunday Assembly is a not-for-profit organization. All the people that spend the tens and dozens and dozens of hours to make this happen, but also the community events are not paid. We're all volunteers. We have a group of 12 board members, and they all give their time generously, and so we count on donations to help make this happen. We particularly appreciate reoccurring donations and any amount of money. You can see Laura after the event here, but that's what really helps us to be able to afford this beautiful venue here with a lovely view of the ocean and absolutely wheelchair accessible for everybody. Our first person coming up is Mimi, talking about a rummage sale. Or did I get that wrong? I did not. That's okay.
Well, next Saturday, I'm hosting a rummage sale at my house. The address is on Meetup. It's going to be a sunny day. And if, unlike today, it was predicted to be a sunny day anyway. If you have anything that does not spark joy that you would like to donate, I'll be taking donations until Friday night. And in fact, if you have anything to donate, could I see a show of hands? Oh, wow. Okay, great. So if you're able to volunteer in any capacity, that would be appreciated too. We're going to sort some things. What? Tuesday night at my house at 6 o'clock. Sort things and price things. And then Saturday morning, bright and early, probably 5 o'clock, to get things out and set up by 7 when the sale starts. And then to staff the sale and put it all away afterwards. So see me if you have any questions, or you can contact me through Facebook or through Meetup. Thanks.
Good morning. So Sunday Assembly San Diego will have a booth at the Pride Festival this year, and we'll be marching a contingent in the parade as well. So we need people to be in that contingent and work at that booth and participate with us in this event. So if you're interested in doing any of those things or doing any of the planning required to make all this happen, please see me or Laura after assembly, and we'd welcome your help. Thank you.
Just really quickly, one thing, if Dan is looking for a second camera person, he's been augmenting the videos with some cut-in shots. So if anybody's interested in doing that, please see Dan afterwards. And I will let you know that Julie has consented to stay for a little while afterwards, and she'll be answering your questions right over in this area. And once again, Mr. Paul Svensson.
Woo! Okay. Let us all stand up and stretch our legs and participate in the United States most requested karaoke song. Where it begins, I can't begin to know, but then I know it's growing strong. Was it the spring, and spring became the summer? Who'd have believed you'd come along? Hands, touching hands, reaching out, touching me, touching you. Here we go, sweet Caroline. The times never seemed so good. I've been inclined to believe they never would, but now I look at the night and it don't seem so lonely. We fill it up with only two. And when I heard wind runs off my shoulder, how can I hurt when holding you? Warm, touching warm, reaching out, touching me, touching you.
thank you very much for being here. If you want to continue, so the community here, snacks over here. We're going to meet at the Barrio Star. Some people will be for a little bit of a respite after. And next month, don't be here because the woman that wrote this book will be here, and it's going to be fantastic. So thank you all very much. Have a great day. Thanks.